What are you even doing here? You were uninvited yesterday." Her words cut through the wedding reception, and suddenly every head turned my way. I smiled at my son's bride, the woman I'd spent $43,000 trying to make happy. "I'm leaving," I said calmly, "but first, meet my special guest, an old friend of yours." Jessica turned, saw who was behind me, and went pale. A second later, she collapsed onto the Italian marble floor. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're from. You're probably wondering how a 67-year-old grandmother ended up pulling off Charleston's most shocking wedding crash. It started 6 months ago, when my son Andrew brought home the most beautiful liar I'd ever met. My name's Margaret Thompson, Maggie to most. Up until last week, I thought I was planning the perfect wedding for my only child. I drained my late husband's life insurance, cashed in bonds, and even borrowed against my house to give Andrew and Jessica the fairy tale day she said she'd dreamed of since she was little. The Bellamy estate with its sweeping gardens, a $12,000 Vera Wang dress, 2,000 white roses flown in from Ecuador. I paid for all of it. Jessica told me her family had disowned her for marrying beneath them. She cried about giving up everything for love. My heart broke for her. I even offered her my grandmother's pearl necklace, a family heirloom passed down for 4 generations. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson," she whispered, tears in her eyes, "you're like the mother I never had." I believed every word. Andrew was crazy about her, and I understood why. Jessica was stunning, golden hair, soft doe eyes, the kind of beauty that makes people forget their own names. She was a pediatric nurse, volunteered at animal shelters, and talked about wanting kids so sincerely I started dreaming about grandbabies. But little things didn't add up. Her stories kept changing. She claimed she'd grown up in different places but couldn't keep her memories straight. She always paid cash and said she didn't trust credit cards. I brushed it off because Andrew was happier than he'd been since his father died. Until one night, everything changed. I went to Andrew's apartment to drop off wedding favors and heard Jessica on the phone. Her voice was low, sharp. "Marcus, I told you not to call me on this number," she hissed. "Yes, the wedding's still on. I'll have access to his accounts after we're married." "What do you mean a bigger cut? We agreed on 30%. My chest went cold. I pressed myself against the wall and listened. "Look, the old lady's already given us over 40 grand, and she'll probably gift us more for the house down payment after the wedding. This Mark is worth at least 200,000, maybe more. No, he doesn't suspect a thing. He's completely hooked." My son, a Mark. I left without her noticing, but I had to pull over 3 blocks away because I couldn't breathe. Everything suddenly made sense. The cash, the lies, the way she'd slowly pushed Andrew away from his friends. She'd already convinced him to add her name to his checking account and upgrade his life insurance for their future. I cried for an hour in that car. Then I stopped. Something inside me hardened. Jessica thought she could ruin my son and drain us dry. She had no idea who she was messing with, but I needed proof. That night, I searched online for a private investigator. By morning, I was sitting across from Patricia Hayes, a retired detective who specialized in fraud cases. She was direct, sharp, and exactly what I needed. "Mrs. Thompson," she said after I had explained the situation, "what you're describing sounds like a classic romance scam with a marriage twist. These people are professionals. They study their targets, learn what they want to hear, and become exactly that person." I slid a check across the table. "How long will it take?" Patricia smiled grimly. For someone stupid enough to use her real voice on the phone, not long at all. 2 weeks later, Patricia called with results that exceeded my worst fears. "Margaret, you're going to want to sit down for this," she said, her voice grim over the phone. "Jessica Miller doesn't exist. The woman your son is planning to marry is actually Sarah Collins, and she has quite the history." I was in my kitchen making tea when she called, and I had to grip the counter to keep from collapsing. "Tell me everything." Sarah Collins, 29 years old, originally from Tampa. She's been arrested 3 times in the past 5 years for fraud, though she's only been convicted once. She works with partners, usually men who help research targets and sometimes pose as family members to add credibility to her stories. My tea kettle was screaming, but I couldn't move to turn it off. "How did you find all this?" The miracle of facial recognition software and some old-fashioned detective work. Sarah's been using the Jessica Miller identity for 8 months, with a complete fake social security number and employment history. The pediatric nursing job? She volunteers occasionally at a free clinic, just enough to make the story believable if anyone checks. I sank into my kitchen chair. Patricia, I need you to find this Marcus Rivera. There was a pause. Margaret, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that a man who's been hunting Sarah for 2 years might be very interested in attending her wedding. Patricia's voice carried a note of admiration. You want him to bring him to the ceremony? I want to give Jessica exactly what she deserves. My voice was steadier than I felt. Can you find him? Already did. He's living in Atlanta now, working construction. I can have his contact information to you within the hour. After hanging up, I sat in my silent kitchen for a long time. Part of me wanted to march straight to Andrew and lay out everything Patricia had discovered. But I knew my son. He was stubborn, like his father, and Sarah had been working on him for months. She'd probably convinced him that any criticism was just jealousy or an attempt to control his life. No, I needed something more dramatic, something that would expose her so completely that there would be no room for denial or manipulation. The wedding was in 10 days, and I was going to make sure it was unforgettable. That afternoon, I called Marcus Rivera. Marcus Rivera speaking. His voice was cautious, professional. I'd caught him during his lunch break at a construction site in Atlanta. Mr. Rivera, my name is Margaret Thompson. I believe you know my son's fiancée, though you knew her as Sarah Collins, not Jessica Miller. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then where is she? She's about to marry my son in Charleston in 9 days. She's stolen over $40,000 from us already, and she's just getting started. I kept my voice steady, businesslike. I think we can help each other. Another pause. Lady, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but she told her partner Marcus that the mark was worth at least $200,000. She's planning to access my son's bank accounts after the marriage and probably disappear within 6 months. I let that sink in. Ring any bells? His intake of breath was sharp. You heard her talking to Marcus? That's me. We had a business arrangement until she screwed me over. Then you understand my position. Mrs. Thompson, what exactly are you proposing? I'd been thinking about this for hours, turning the plan over in my mind until it fit perfectly. She's having a church wedding with 300 guests, very public, very prestigious. What if her past walked through those church doors in the middle of her moment of triumph? You want me to crash the wedding? There was something like admiration in his voice. I want you to expose her, in front of everyone she's been lying to, in front of my son, who deserves to know the truth before she destroys his life. Marcus was quiet for several minutes. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder. She took $15,000 from me and vanished in the middle of the night, left me holding the bag on a hotel room bill and a rental car. I've been looking for her for 2 years. Then this is your chance. What's in it for you? Besides saving your son, I mean. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Justice, Mr. Rivera. Plain and simple. We talked for another 20 minutes, working out the details. Marcus would drive down the morning of the wedding and wait for my signal. I had already been uninvited, Sarah having convinced Andrew that his mother was trying to sabotage their happiness, but I had ways of getting into the Bellamy estate that didn't involve the front door. After we hung up, I realized I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The helpless fury was gone, replaced by something much more satisfying: purpose. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. I canceled my hair appointment and my dress alteration. If I was going to be uninvited from my son's wedding, I certainly wasn't going to look my best for the occasion. Instead, I focused on other details, like making sure the wedding would have some very expensive complications. 3 days before the wedding, I made a series of phone calls that would have made a corporate raider proud. The first was to the Bellamy Estate's event coordinator. Mrs. Sullivan, this is Margaret Thompson, mother of the groom for the Thompson-Miller wedding on Saturday. Oh, Mrs. Thompson, how lovely to hear from you. I hope you're excited for the big day. If only she knew. Actually, I'm calling because there's been a change in the payment arrangement. The bride's family has decided to cover the final balance after all. I paused, letting my voice fill with the kind of grandmotherly pleasure event coordinators lived for. It's so wonderful when families come together, don't you think? That's absolutely lovely. Should I expect a payment from them directly? Oh, yes! They'll be handling everything from here on out. In fact, you should probably hold off on processing any payments from my account until you hear directly from the Miller family. I gave her the fake phone number Patricia had confirmed Sarah was using for wedding vendors. They're very particular about handling their own finances. The second call was to the florist, the third to the caterer, the fourth to the photographer. Each conversation was similar. The bride's family was taking over final payments, so pleased to be reconciling with their daughter, so excited to contribute to this special day. Of course, the Miller family didn't exist, and Sarah would have no idea that vendors were trying to reach her on a number she never answered. By Saturday morning, the Bellamy estate would be facing a very expensive problem with no immediate solution. But my masterpiece was the call I made to Andrew. Mom? He sounded tired, stressed. I really can't talk right now. Jessica's been upset about you not being at the rehearsal dinner. And Andrew, sweetheart, I completely understand Jessica's feelings. In fact, I've been doing some thinking, and I realize I may have been a bit overbearing about the wedding plans. Silence, then, really? Really? This is Jessica's day, and if she feels my presence would be stressful, then of course I should respect that. I paused for effect. I love you too much to do anything that might spoil your happiness. Mom, his voice cracked slightly. Are you sure? Jessica might change her mind if you talk to her. Oh, darling, I don't think that's necessary. You know what? I'm going to take a little trip this weekend. Maybe drive up to Savannah, do some antiquing, give you two some space to enjoy your special day without any family drama. The relief in his voice was painful to hear. That's really thoughtful of you, Mom. I just want you to be happy, sweetheart. That's all I've ever wanted. After hanging up, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. The conversation was necessary, but it hurt in ways I hadn't expected. Andrew genuinely believed I was the problem, that my concerns about Jessica came from selfishness or jealousy rather than maternal instinct. Well, by Sunday morning, he'd understand everything. Friday evening, Sarah called me herself. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Mrs. Thompson, it's Jessica. I wanted to thank you for being so understanding about tomorrow. I know it might seem harsh, but not at all, dear. I completely understand. I matched her tone perfectly. A bride should feel completely comfortable on her wedding day. That's so gracious of you. Andrew said you're going to Savannah for the weekend. Fishing for information. Classic. That's the plan. A little mother of the groom getaway while you two start your honeymoon. Well, I hope you have a wonderful time. And Mrs. Thompson, after Andrew and I get settled, maybe we could have lunch. I'd really like for us to be friends. The audacity was breathtaking. That sounds lovely, Jessica. I'm sure we'll have so much to talk about. After ending the call, I poured myself a generous glass of wine and toasted my reflection in the kitchen window. Here's to family friends, Margaret. May they get exactly what they deserve. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that wedding photographers call romantic and brides call disastrous. I woke up at 5 a.m. too excited to sleep and spent the morning preparing for what would either be the most brilliant or most catastrophic day of my life. At 9 a.m., Marcus Rivera called from a gas station 20 minutes outside Charleston. Here, Mrs. Thompson, you sure about this? I looked at myself in the hallway mirror dressed in a simple black dress with my grandmother's pearls, the ones Jessica had admired so much. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. What if your son doesn't forgive you? It was a question I'd been avoiding for days.
then I'll have saved him from a woman who would have destroyed him financially and emotionally. Sometimes love means being the villain in someone else's story until they're ready to see the truth. Damn, you're tougher than you sound. I almost smiled. Mr. Rivera, I raised a son, buried a husband, and survived 67 years in the South. I'm tougher than I look, too. The wedding was scheduled for 2 o'clock, with the reception immediately following in the estate's grand ballroom. I'd timed everything perfectly. Marcus would arrive at the venue at 1:30 and wait in his car until I texted him. I would enter through the garden entrance, a route I knew well from my multiple venue visits, and position myself where I could watch the ceremony unfold. At 11 a.m., my phone started ringing. First the florist, then the caterer, then the venue coordinator. All panicked, all trying to reach someone from the Miller family about outstanding balances that needed to be resolved immediately. I let every call go to voicemail. At noon, Andrew called. "Mom, something weird is happening. All the wedding vendors are calling Jessica about payments, but she says she never told them her family was handling anything. Do you know what's going on?" Oh my goodness, that does sound confusing. What did Jessica say? She's pretty upset. She thinks someone is trying to sabotage the wedding. There was a pause. Mom, you didn't, I mean, you wouldn't. Andrew Thompson, are you suggesting your mother would sabotage your wedding? I injected just the right amount of hurt into my voice. After everything I've done to help make this day perfect? No, I'm sorry. Jessica is really stressed, and when people are stressed, they sometimes they look for someone to blame. I finished gently. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm sure it's just a vendor mix-up. These things happen. The important thing is that you're marrying the woman you love today. If only he knew how true that statement was about to become. After hanging up, I checked my watch. 1. Time to get into position for the show of a lifetime. I grabbed my purse, took a deep breath, and headed for my car. The drive to the Bellamy estate took 15 minutes through Charleston's historic district. Spanish moss draped the ancient oak trees like bridal veils. And despite everything, I felt a pang of sadness that this beautiful venue would forever be associated with deception rather than celebration. But Sarah Collins had made her choices, and now she was about to face the consequences. I parked 2 blocks away and walked to the estate's back entrance, the one near the catering kitchen I'd spotted during my venue tours. The staff was too busy dealing with payment crises to pay attention to one more woman in a black dress carrying flowers. By 2:15, I was positioned behind a marble column in the back of the chapel, watching my son's face glow with happiness as he waited for his bride to walk down the aisle. In 15 minutes, that happiness would be shattered, and I would be responsible. But sometimes, I reminded myself, as the wedding march began to play, love requires you to be strong enough to break someone's heart in order to save their life. The chapel doors opened, and Sarah Collins, playing the role of Jessica Miller for the last time, began her walk down the aisle in her $12,000 dress and my grandmother's pearls. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to Marcus Rivera. Now. Marcus Rivera walked through those chapel doors like an avenging angel in a rumpled suit. Every head turned as he strode down the aisle with the confidence of a man who'd been hunting his prey for 2 years. Sarah's bouquet of white roses hit the marble floor with a sound like breaking glass.
"Sarah Collins," Marcus called out, his voice echoing through the stunned silence. "Did you really think you could hide forever?" The chaos that followed was everything I'd imagined and more. Andrew stepped protectively in front of his bride, confusion written across his face. "Sir, I think you have the wrong person. This is Jessica Miller." Marcus laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. "Jessica Miller? Is that what she's calling herself now?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. "Her real name is Sarah Collins, and she's a professional con artist. I should know. I was her partner until she stole $15,000 from me." "That's not true." Sarah's voice was shrill, desperate. "Andrew, I don't know this man. He's clearly mentally ill." But I could see the cracks forming in her performance. Her hands were shaking, and that honey-sweet voice had developed a sharp edge that hadn't been there before. The mask was finally slipping. Marcus opened the folder and held up photographs. "Here's Sarah at the Ritz-Carlton in Miami, running a credit card scam on elderly tourists. Here she is in Birmingham, posing as a cancer patient to steal from church collection funds." His voice grew colder with each revelation. "And here's my favorite, Sarah leaving our hotel room in Memphis with my watch, my wallet, and the engagement ring I was stupid enough to buy her." Andrew's face had gone pale. "Jessica, what is he talking about?" "That's not true." Sarah's voice cracked. "Andrew, you know me. We're getting married. I love you." "Love," Marcus barked. "Lady, you wouldn't recognize love if it bit you on your lying ass. You want to know what she really thinks about your precious Andrew?" He pulled out his phone and held it up. "I've got recordings from our partnership. Want to hear what she called him? Her pathetic mama's boy Mark?" The wedding guests were murmuring now, a low buzz of shock and confusion, spreading through the chapel. I watched from behind my column as my son's world crumbled in real time. And despite everything, my heart ached for him. But Sarah wasn't finished fighting. "Even if any of that were true," she said, forcing her voice back to its practiced sweetness, "people can change. I'm not that person anymore. Andrew believes in second chances, don't you, darling?" It was a masterful manipulation, appealing to Andrew's fundamental decency and making him choose between believing in human redemption or accepting that the woman he loved was a complete fabrication. Unfortunately for Sarah, I'd given Marcus one more piece of ammunition. "Second chances," Marcus smiled coldly. "Tell him about the other Mark, Sarah, the one you're working right now." Andrew turned to look at his bride, and I saw the exact moment when doubt crept into his eyes. "What is he talking about, Jessica?" "I have no idea." But her voice was too quick, too defensive. Marcus consulted his phone. "Let me refresh your memory. 3 weeks ago, you called me asking for advice about, quote, a lonely old bat who's already given you $40,000? Ring any bells?" The silence that followed Marcus's revelation was deafening. Every eye in the chapel turned to Sarah, waiting for her response. I watched my son's face transform as understanding slowly dawned, and I had to grip the marble column to keep from revealing my position. "That's—" Sarah's voice failed her. She tried again. "That's taken out of context." "Context?" Andrew's voice was barely a whisper. "You called my mother a lonely old bat?" "Andrew, no, I didn't mean it that way. This man is trying to what? Tell the truth?" Andrew's voice was growing stronger now, anger replacing confusion. "My mother has given us everything. She emptied her savings account for our wedding. She borrowed against her house so you could have your dream ceremony." The wedding guests were no longer murmuring. They were listening intently to every word. I spotted several people recording with their phones, including Andrew's college roommate, who looked like he was live streaming the whole disaster. Marcus wasn't done. "You want to know the real kicker? She was planning to clean out your bank accounts and disappear within 6 months. It's her standard timeline, long enough to establish legal claim to marital assets, short enough to avoid getting too attached." "Stop it," Sarah pleaded, but her composure was completely gone now. Tears streamed down her face, though either they were genuine or part of the performance, I couldn't tell. Andrew stepped away from her, his face a mask of disgust and betrayal. "Is it true? Any of it?" Sarah looked around desperately like a trapped animal seeking escape. The chapel doors were blocked by curious guests who'd moved closer to hear better. The altar offered no sanctuary. Finally, her gaze found mine across the crowded space. Our eyes met, and I saw recognition bloom on her face. She knew exactly who had orchestrated this moment. "You!" she whispered, pointing directly at me. "This was you!" All heads turned to follow her finger, and suddenly I found myself the center of attention in a way I'd never intended. So much for staying hidden until the grand finale. Andrew's eyes widened when he spotted me. "Mom, what are you doing here? You said you were going to Savannah." "I lied, sweetheart. Something I learned from watching The Experts."
You orchestrated this? Andrew's voice was a mixture of horror and admiration. I exposed it, I corrected. There's a difference. Sarah had found her voice again, and with it her talent for manipulation. She's jealous, Andrew. Your mother couldn't stand that you chose me over her. She hired this man to destroy our wedding because she wants to control your life forever. It was a clever last-ditch effort, playing on every mother-in-law stereotype in existence. For a moment, I saw doubt creep back into Andrew's eyes. 29 years of Sarah's practiced manipulation versus 67 years of my love and sacrifice. Which would he choose to believe? That's when Marcus played his trump card. Mrs. Thompson didn't hire me, lady. I volunteered. He held up his phone again. Want to hear the recording I made of our conversation 3 weeks ago? The one where you laugh about how easy it is to manipulate lonely old women and their devoted sons? The recording quality wasn't perfect, but Sarah's voice came through clearly. The old bat is so desperate for grandchildren, she'll believe anything. And the son? Complete mama's boy. All I have to do is cry about my tragic past, and he writes another check. Andrew's face went white, then red, then a sickly gray color that made me want to rush to his side. But this moment wasn't about protecting him anymore. It was about him finally seeing the truth. You want to hear the best part? Sarah's voice continued from the phone. She gave me her grandmother's pearl necklace, said it was a family heirloom. I'll probably hawk it after the honeymoon. Instinctively, Andrew's eyes went to Sarah's throat, where the pearls worn by 4 generations of Thompson women, passed down from mother to daughter-in-law as a symbol of acceptance and love, gleamed against her pale skin. Sarah's hands flew to her neck, covering the necklace as if she could hide the evidence. Andrew, I can explain. Explain what? His voice was deadly quiet now. Explain how you've been laughing at my mother behind her back while spending her money? Explain how you called me a mama's boy while pretending to love me? Explain how you were planning to rob us blind and disappear? The fight went out of Sarah all at once. Her shoulders sagged, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked her actual age instead of the innocent young woman she'd been pretending to be. It started as a job, just another mark. But then, I don't know. I thought maybe I could make it real by lying about everything. Andrew's voice cracked. Your name, your job, your family, your entire life story, what was exactly supposed to be real about us? Sarah looked around the chapel one more time, taking in the hundreds of faces staring at her with mixtures of shock, disgust, and fascination. The elaborate flower arrangements, the photographer still snapping pictures, the videographer capturing every moment of her public humiliation. It was all too much. I need to leave, she whispered. Yes, you do. But Sarah Collins wasn't quite finished. As she gathered up her dress to walk down the aisle, she turned back to face me with a look of pure hatred. You think you've won, don't you? Congratulations, Mrs. Thompson. You got your precious son back. But you know what? He's never going to trust another woman again after this. You've ruined him for love forever. Also, you get to stay the most important woman in his life. The words hit their mark. I felt a stab of doubt, wondering if my quest for justice had crossed the line into something darker and more selfish. But Andrew surprised me. No, he said firmly, she didn't ruin me. You did. And you know what the difference is? Mom was trying to protect me. You were trying to destroy me. Sarah's face twisted with fury. You'll regret this, both of you. I have friends, connections. This isn't over. Marcus stepped forward, his expression amused. Actually, it is over. See, while you've been putting on your little performance here, the FBI has been very interested in our conversation about your current con game. They're particularly fascinated with your fake social security number and fraudulent employment history. You wouldn't dare. Already did, sweetheart. They should be here any minute to escort you out. He checked his watch. In fact, I'm surprised they haven't arrived yet.
As if summoned by his words, 2 men in dark suits appeared at the chapel entrance. They moved with the purposeful stride of federal agents, and Sarah's last hope of a dignified exit evaporated. Sarah Collins, the taller agent said, holding up his badge. FBI. You're under arrest for fraud, identity theft and violation of federal banking regulations. What followed was a scene I'd never imagined witnessing at my son's wedding. Federal agents reading Miranda rights in a chapel decorated with white roses and baby's breath. Wedding guests fumbling for their phones to record history in the making. A bride in a $12,000 dress being led away in handcuffs. Sarah didn't go quietly. As the agents escorted her down the aisle, she kept turning back to scream at Andrew and me. "This is harassment! I haven't done anything wrong! You'll be hearing from my lawyers!" But her protests fell on deaf ears. Half the chapel was recording her arrest, and the other half was already texting the news to friends and family who'd missed the show. By evening, the video would be all over social media with hashtags like #weddingcrash and #conartistbride. After the agents left with Sarah, an eerie silence settled over the chapel. 300 wedding guests sat in their pews, unsure whether to leave or stay, congratulate or commiserate. The minister stood at the altar looking like he'd never encountered this situation in seminary school. Andrew remained at the altar, still wearing his tuxedo, staring at the doors where his bride had just been arrested. I wanted to go to him, but something held me back. This was his moment to process, to grieve, to figure out what came next. Finally, he turned to face the congregation. "Well," he said, his voice carrying across the silent chapel, "this is awkward." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. "I want to thank everyone for coming today. I know this isn't how you expected to spend your Saturday afternoon." He paused, running his hair through his hair. "The wedding is obviously canceled, but the reception is already paid for, so if anyone wants to stay for dinner and an open bar, you're welcome to it. God knows I could use a drink." This time the laughter was more genuine. People began standing, stretching, talking in small groups as the shock wore off and the reality of the situation set in. Andrew finally looked in my direction. Our eyes met across the chaos, and I saw a mixture of gratitude, embarrassment, and something that might have been admiration. He walked down the aisle toward me, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. When he reached me, he stopped and just stood there for a moment, studying my face. "Mom," he said finally, "we need to talk." I nodded. "Yes, we do. But first," he reached up and carefully unclasped my grandmother's pearl necklace from around his throat. "These belong to you." I took the pearls with shaking hands, feeling their familiar weight. "Actually, they belong to the woman my son eventually marries, when he finds someone worthy of them." Andrew's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for not believing you, for choosing her over you, for being such an idiot." "You weren't an idiot, sweetheart. You were in love. Or at least, you were in love with the person you thought she was. Love makes us all vulnerable. The important thing is that you're safe." "How long did you know?" "I started suspecting something about a month ago. I had proof 2 weeks ago." I met his eyes. "I hired a private investigator, and Marcus, he volunteered for revenge duty when I called and told him where to find her." I smiled slightly. "Hell hath no fury like a con artist scorned, apparently." Andrew laughed despite everything. "You've been busy, haven't you?" "I've had a very educational few weeks." I took his arm. "Now, what do you say we go face the music at your non-reception? People are going to have questions." As we walked down the aisle together, I caught snippets of conversation from the departing guests. Most of it was shock and amazement, but I also heard genuine concern for Andrew and grudging respect for what they were calling my detective work. Mrs. Henderson from next door grabbed my arm as we passed. "Margaret Thompson, you are one smart cookie. I never trusted that girl. Too pretty and too sweet. Real women have edges."
The reception that wasn't a reception turned out to be the most honest party I had ever attended. With the pretense of a wedding celebration stripped away, people relaxed in a way they never do at formal events. The bar opened early, the band played blues instead of wedding classics, and conversations flowed with the kind of authenticity that only comes after shared trauma. Andrew handled himself with more grace than I dared hope. He worked the room like a politician, thanking people for coming, apologizing for the drama, and accepting condolences with good humor. I watched him from across the ballroom and felt a pride that had nothing to do with his professional achievements or his choice in women. This was my son showing real character under pressure. Marcus Rivera found me by the dessert table, where I was contemplating whether it was appropriate to eat wedding cake when there hadn't actually been a wedding. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, extending his hand, "I wanted to thank you for giving me the chance to face Sarah after all this time." I shook his hand. "I should thank you. I could never have exposed her without your help. What you did took guts. Not many mothers would go those lengths. Any mother would have done the same thing to protect her child. No, ma'am. Most mothers would have tried to talk her son out of it and failed. You played chess while the rest of us were playing checkers." After he left, I found myself alone with my thoughts for the first time all day. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by exhaustion and something that might have been sadness. Yes, I'd saved Andrew from a terrible marriage and potential financial ruin, but I'd also destroyed his faith in love, at least temporarily. Had I done the right thing? "Mom," Andrew appeared beside me with 2 glasses of champagne. "You look like you're having second thoughts." I accepted the glass gratefully. "Just wondering if there might have been a gentler way to handle this." "You mean like sitting me down and explaining that my fiancé was a con artist? Because we both know how well I would have received that news." He had a point. Anyone else would have thought I was jealous and controlling. I probably would have accused him of exactly what Sarah claimed, trying to keep me dependent on him forever. Andrew took a slow sip of champagne. "You know what really changed my mind? It wasn't Marcus showing up, and it wasn't even the recording. It was watching Sarah's face when she realized you'd beaten her. For just a second, her mask slipped, and I saw who she really was." "What did you see?" "Cold calculation and genuine respect, like she'd finally met a worthy opponent." He turned to me, his expression softer now. "She underestimated you completely. She thought you were just a lonely old woman desperate to keep her son happy. She had no idea she was trying to con someone who was 2 steps ahead. I'm not sure about smarter, maybe just more motivated." "Mom," Andrew said, shaking his head, "you exposed a professional con artist by turning her own partner and the FBI against her. That wasn't luck. That was strategy." We stood there for a while, just listening to the jazz band as couples danced under the soft lights. The chaos was over, replaced by quiet relief. "I have a confession," he said finally. "What is it?" A part of me's relieved, not about the arrest or the public embarrassment, but because something always felt off about Jessica. I could never explain it, but sometimes when I'd catch her off guard, she'd look at me like she was trying to remember who she was supposed to be. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I thought it was just wedding stress. And because," he hesitated, "because I was 32 and had never been in love before. I thought if I questioned it too much, I'd ruin it." My chest tightened. "Oh, sweetheart, I know." Pathetic, right? The mama boy who falls for the first pretty girl who notices him? "No," I said firmly. "Human. We all want to be loved. There's nothing pathetic about that, even when we choose the wrong person." I took his hand. Andrew, Jessica did what wasn't your fault. She studied you, learned what you wanted to hear, and became exactly that person. You weren't gullible. You were targeted. He squeezed my hand, his voice quieter now. Thanks, Mom, for seeing through her, for protecting me, and for making sure I couldn't ignore the truth. You're welcome. But next time you fall in love, maybe introduce me sooner. He laughed.
Next time I fall in love, I'm running a full background check first. That's a little extreme. After today, not really, he smirked. Besides, I've learned something important about the women in my life. Oh, what's that? Never underestimate a Thompson woman. We're a lot more dangerous than we look. I smiled, lighter than I had in months. Your grandmother would have been proud. She'd have loved watching you handle this. Andrew raised his glass to justice, served ice cold with a side of public humiliation. I clinked my glass against his, to family, and knowing when to fight for the people you love. As we toasted, I realized something. Despite the lies, the betrayal, and the spectacle, I was exactly where I belonged, beside my son. He was safe, free, and finally seeing clearly. Sometimes the best weddings are the ones that never happen. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you've got a story of your own, share it in the comments. Your voice matters.